Hi, my name is Ori Desai, and this is my presentation on MalMoE, meanings and the value of written memorabilia for this movie for Korean 3004-15. So the historical context for the movie MalMoE, the initial Japanese occupation sort of started and got its foothold in 1895, and for 30 to 45 years afterwards, there was a resultant occupant presence, there was colonization, and the presence of Japanese forces in the area led to assimilation of the native Korean processes and the social situation, and whether this meant adopting Japanese names or teaching Japanese in schools and sort of overturning the Korean educational system to civil and government processes and requirements, wherever there were touch points or touch bases where Korean people and Japanese people ended up living together and having to coincide in these areas, there ended up being attempts by the Japanese forces in the area to sort of quiet and oppress Korean traditional history, Korean culture, and so assimilating Seoul cites it in a really good way, in which it says that the Japanese officials in the area were trying to um, elicit civil, spiritual, and material assimilation. So they ended up forcing Korean natives to take up Shintoism, purchase shrines for their homes. They forced Korean natives to adopt Japanese names, work on to progress the Japanese system of civil organization, city organization, like that. And there were diverse responses to this. So people either responded with obedience and submitting, or they responded with resistance. And so the movie MalMoE is about a group of these resistors. And our main character is Kim Pan-soo, who is a no-good man for hire. He ends up getting involved with these resistance linguists through his friend Mr. Jo, and he ends up running errands and eventually moving from not understanding their motives or their intentions to eventually finding a cause that he can devote his entire life to. These company of linguists face a lot of different challenges over the course of the movie as they work on researching Saturi words across the country, documenting them, and eventually deciding on a unified collective dictionary. And the arc of the movie follows Pansu as he grows not only as a person and an employee for these linguists, but also as a father and a family member. So the movie's main creators were writer and director Om Myuna, the producer is Park Eun Kyung, and the cinematographer was Chae Young Wan. And the key movie cast or characters are made up of Pansu and the group of linguists. So Kim Pansu, Ryu Jongwan, Mr. Jo, Park Hoon, Koo Jae-young, Im Dong-ik, and Min Woo-chul. And so there are a lot of different themes and messages that MalMoE manages to convey in its runtime. And some of these key themes are the value of literature, language, and words to a country's culture. So the movie is really focused on and devoted to talking about how important these words are and how important that it is that literacy and media are involved in independence and free thought. So, like we see, the Japanese officials are forcing Kutaeong at one point to speak in Japanese because they're trying to impose their will upon her, and her resistance is her answer. The movie also talks about the importance of preserving free speech and making sure that education and learning are free of political interference. In the way that Pansu's son Deok-jin ends up sort of advising his father and his younger sister to stay away from Korean culture and Korean names because due to his experiences at school with violence and punishment, he knows that if his younger sister is also involved in Korean language and she refuses to change her name, she may face the same challenges. The movie also talks about assimilation and the impact of colonization on the sort of destruction and damage on traditional culture and ideas, which Chongwan talks a little bit about as he talks to Pansu about his reasons for joining the resistance and fighting back because he bumps into a little Korean boy who can't speak any Korean at all. The movie also talks about the importance of power in numbers, in resisting, and also the value of learning in elevating and changing people's lives. So Pansu's journey as he learns Hangul ends up totally converting him as a human being. So some of these key movie arcs or motifs that we see over and over are the process of Pansu learning to read and write in Korean as he ends up becoming involved with the linguists. So we see a lot of comedic scenes where he spends an all-nighter reading a really emotional book, or when he's finally able to read all the street signs. And we're able to see how his investment in the team sort of ends up improving his education and his identity in society as well. And the linguists in the movie, who are following their own cause and their own sort of pursuit of knowledge, see a lot of situations where they're faced with risks and challenges and threats, but their investment in their cause and in preserving the Korean language ends up hardening their intentions, and it helps them resist the force that's imposed on them. And so, again, in this scene with Chaeyoung, she is forced by these officers to speak in Japanese, but the resulting, message that we see, which is a really famous quote from the movie, is that she talks about the value of using uri nara. And how Korean people have a strong collective identity, and that strong collective identity is what enables them to pursue independence and resistance, because they're able to use their words to shape and form their identity. Again, the slide explores some of the thematic choices that the movie explores. The power of people resisting in numbers comes up very often. So, in this funny scene where Pansu has found a bunch of old colleagues of his from different areas in Korea, they're able to identify very quickly the various dialects used to describe a specific word. And again, the power of community comes up when the community sends out, the linguists send out a ask to newspapers all across the country seeking information on specific dialects and vocabulary, and they get almost an entire room full of letters, which shows just how the movie is talking about patriotism and how the strong culture of nationality and pride in their culture ends up propelling Koreans through through their resistance and their fight for independence. And in the end, this is also a spoiler, but Pansu goes from somebody who doesn't have a lot of investment in the country's fate, and he's just worried about himself and his own family, to eventually being able to find a cause that he's willing to protect and eventually die for. And so these are some of the main key points and ideas that keep coming across throughout the movie. And an interesting aspect about the movie is the value of youth in the story, and how throughout the story we see that in the end, the loss of language is going to most hurt and prevent the youth of the country. So, like I talked about earlier, Tokjin is sort of challenged by, his identity as a student at this time, and he is fearful because of the consequences he's faced in the past. Meanwhile, Suni is able to sort of embrace Korean language and traditions because she hasn't been told or faced any sort of opposition to identifying with Korean tradition. And so I think it was a really valuable part of the story to understand that the linguists are constantly, worried about the system of education because they know it's going to impact their youth in the future. And in this final part for key takeaways, I think the scene where Chongwan apologizes to Pansu for judging him, in a scene where he is caught in a sort of uncomfortable situation, says that where people gather, there are words. Where words come together, the will can be formed, and with the will shared, we'll find a way for independence. And so this movie really was very valuable in talking about the sort of impact of assimilation in Korea at the historical time, and just how important it is to protect free speech and protect languages and words, especially when words and languages can offer so much about a culture's history and what they find important and valuable and meaningful to them. So thank you for listening to this presentation, and I hope each of you go out and watch this movie as well.